Gulchi Shuhan, Tlachonach Yekewe Adeyeji ni ye, Yachana Katliat Gekana. Shukwaach to Asaku. Kunach Dark, Yin Kachanik. Dat Yachsawe, just Lingít Yuchatangi away with this coup. Would do the coup. A car, Kate Ka Yuchatangi, Kone Ayashtu Hours to one. Kachwan shawe ach tu yata. Ot washi at sounds like a broken pot. He said that's the term that they used to use for people who spoke Lingít, and as they started to learn English, and their English was really broken, right? And so as you go from one language to another, you always got to give yourself grace and give other people grace, right? And just sort of say this transition of nesting an entire language and the thought universe into your mind is wild. So sometimes as an adult learner, you think, I don't want to sound like I'm a new learner. I want to sound like an adult. But then you got to give yourself that time to go there. And through this, maintain the confidence to keep speaking. The only way to find where all your gaps are is by continuing to speak and to listen. And then to do that work with your English brain to fill those gaps so you can just sort of switch over to your Lingít brain. So I thought we'd look at this video again. I think we saw it once before maybe. Oh, I don't know if I did the sound. Hold on. I didn't do the sound.
An empty skull would be the shakachago.
Mm-hmm.
The shakachago.
Empty skull.
Oh,
Shakachago.
no brains in it.
But with all your brains and everything, it's shakanuko.
When your brains are all in there.
I used to have so much fun with those speakers. And so I guess with Halloween coming up, we'll look at some skeleton parts. Then we'll look at a few Halloween phrases that are shared by Gold Belt Heritage. And then we'll just sort of start looking at a story just for fun. And so a lot of what we do in intermediate Lingít is we start taking a detailed look at all the parts of the language with the idea of sort of saying, here's these things, gotta go learn them. Here's these things, gotta go learn them. Here's these things, gotta go learn them. Then we'll do some activities where we start to use these things. And the things like nouns, adjectives, adverbs, direction and location terms, more body parts. And then through that, we start sort of continuing to add some phrases that we're going to use, and we start learning verbs. But through all of that, that's the sort of like filling up the boxes work that we got to do. One is like showing you all what kind of boxes there are, and then filling those boxes with stuff. But then we sort of supplement that with small activities and stories. So we're going to have this story that we're going to be working through until we're done with it. So this is going to be it'll be in Tlingit, and we'll take turns reading it, and then we're going to translate it together, digging into the resources, seeing like, okay, when I see that thing and I don't know what it is, how do I find what it is? But it's kind of fun to think about these categories. So let's talk about like a skeleton. So the phrase for an entire skeleton, and everybody repeat after me. Kahagu.
Kahagu.
I got the vowel wrong. Hold on. Kahagu.
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 There's a related verb root to this, which means for something to, let's go find it.
Is that only for a human skeleton?
No, well, that would be claw, but you could have kate chagu if it was a dog's skeleton. So the claw part makes it a person's. We're going to look up this chag and see if it's a verb root. Oh, that's not it. Okay, hold on. So this document we probably haven't looked at yet. So this is called the Clankit stem list. So I also want us to start thinking about some of these more advanced documents that should just be in your collection. You should have your digital fingerprints on these. And so what this lists is a bunch of stems and small words, like all the little parts. And so it's not quite as sometimes user-friendly as some of the other stuff. But if you go through, like you're going to find a whole bunch of stuff in here. So chen, Baleen. The way it's written is a little bit different. So there's some things. This letter U with this downward thing after, that means there's two O's. Right, so this was written quite a few years ago. We're going to go, and so if you're ever looking and you want to see a little bit more information about a verb root, check this out, right? So here's chach, to give up, to be in despair. And here's chag, to become bare of flesh or skin. That's where the word for skeleton comes from. It's also an empty shell. And then there's other cases where it's crisp and dry weather, to steam a shell open. But in this case, it means for the flesh to come off of something. So that's where the word for skeleton comes from. So as you go through this stuff too, and then you see down here, shakachaku is down here, and this is going back. That's a skull that's empty. So again, it comes back to this same, it's related to this verb root, which means for something to, for the flesh to be gone. Right? So then you got an empty skeleton. Shakanuchu is head on shell. So that nuch is a shell. So as we sort of continue to learn Lingít, we're always looking for the little parts, because the little parts reveal the Lingít thought world. Let's go back to our skeleton.
What's like so I was looking at the one for old salmon, and it starts off with DZ dash. So the DZ, that's just like the classifier?
Yeah, which one is it?
I was looking at the one for salmon that gets white fungus. It's right above Baleen at the bottom.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Just one example.
Yeah, so this DZ would show you that there's the classifier. And then so we can take this, so here's this ʼaan to get scabs, for salmon to get a white fungus, and this letter J. So yeah, this is coding a lot of stuff, right? So it's sometimes showing us the classifier. In parentheses here, you got this 0. That means it's a 0 group conjugation type. And so we'll get to that, but sort of like when we start to learn how verbs work, as soon as we look up a verb, there's a number of things we're looking for. Is there an object? Is there a subject? Is there any sort of thematic prefix like ka or tu, right here, sha? Those are nouns that can be built into verbs. Tu is inside a closed container. Sha is the head of something. Then we look, so object, subject, thematic prefix. What's the classifier group? I need to know that so I can move it one way or the other. It's going to be in its natural state, or we're going to add this letter I to it. The letter I gets added to the classifier if the verb has happened. That's what it marks. Then there's going to be the verb root, and eventually you're going to learn like the verb root also has a type of stem variation, which means this is how the stem wants to move when you start changing the vowel. So if the vowel, if it's chak, then it might be chuk, chak, chak. It might be one of those three: short and high, long and low, long and high. And it's predictable. It's predictable. But so this G in parentheses means it's qa conjugation. N in parentheses, na conjugation. Zero, zero conjugation. G is g conjugation. And we'll learn later, like, what does that mean? It affects the verb and how it conjugates. When you start to move this verb around, you have to know whether it's zero, na, ga, or qa. Okay.
And that long slash, that just means long vowel.
Yeah.
So A would just be long A, E would be double E.
We always, when we write the verb theme out, we'll always put long and low for the verb stem. That's how we'll write it. And then that way, when you go look them up, even if it says T, you look up T-E-E. Okay, so let's do it this way. So here's the one. So these all say do, but that do could be ach or I. Do, ha, yi, hastu, or ka. This low tone ka means a person's. So a skull is shakachagu. Shakachagu. The jawbone is a long one. Khas tutsaqi. Khas tutsaqi. So khas is a jaw. Tu is inside. Tsaq is a bone. So you're going to see tsaqi down in a whole bunch of these. It's a bone. So if this is the spine, we'll say it and then I'll ask you something. Dich tutsaqi. Tutsaqi. What do you think the dich is? So there's two inside bone.
The back.
The back. So back inside bone. Shayatak. This is it's the collarbone, and the shayatak refers to actually the dent, just I think it's just above or maybe below. It means like a little dent because it's the same word for a shatak for your temple. Shoulder blade. Some of them have their own actual names, which is always interesting to me. Is it called the something inside bone or the something bone, or does it have its own name? So this one is the shoulder blade. Uhu. Next one. Chikshatut'aqi. Chikshatut'aqi. So there's two inside, tsaq, bone. What's in front of it?
Head.
Sha is the head. So body parts, a whole bunch of body parts can have a head. Ek, sha. So you have a finger head, right? That's your fingertip. So what is this part?
Shoulder.
Yeah. So well, chik is the upper arm, and then chiksha is the shoulder. So it's the head of the upper arm. And so this one year, we're starting intermediate Tlingit 1 in the fall. Someone else was teaching beginning Tlingit. And then someone I knew said, I want to learn Tlingit, but I want to learn from you. Could I just jump into intermediate Tlingit? I was like, yeah, well, we record the beginning Tlingit classes. Watch as many as you can and give it a shot. So then we did one of those games where we go around and we name some type of thing without repeating it. And so we did body parts. And it just worked out really well because he didn't know very many body parts. Everyone else did. And maybe he didn't study. I don't know. But the person next to him said, ek. So then he said, eksha. And it worked. I was like, yeah, okay. Next round. The person next to him said, chik. So he goes, chiksha. It's like, all right, I see what he's doing there. Then the person next to him, so when it came around again, he said, plow, which is a penis. So he just turned totally red. I was like, I wouldn't do it, but it's probably grammatically accurate.
You didn't say it?
No. He laughed too. He couldn't do it. He couldn't bring himself to do it.
What he knew what it meant,
Yeah.
which meant he had a vocabulary.
Yeah. So like, you know,
Okay.
a lot of there's some of the choice words that people do get pretty early. Okay. Wu katsaqi.
Ooh, good job.
Wu katsaqi.
Ooh,
So in front of the bone, it's a little bit different, right? So there's not tu. It's ka, right? On. And whenever we want to know what it's on, here's the big thing. Next week, when we start learning these things, on, around, below, above, it comes after the noun. In English, they're called prepositions because they're in the pre-position. In Tlingit, they're called postpositions because they're in the post position. What's the woo?
Chest.
Chest, right? Chest on bone. Again, they're kind of interesting. It makes me feel like the chest is below the bone. I don't know. Rib, tsuk,
Ooh,
tsuk,
ooh,
tsuk.
ooh.
And then there's some fine points here. I believe both of these front arm bones, sudi,
Sooty.
sudi, sudi.
Sooty.
Okay. It's aqi,
It's
it's aqi.
It's
What do we see there? What are the two parts? It's aq, yeah, it's the bone.
is hip. Or is it?
Okay is the base of the spine.
Oh.
It's interesting, right? And so, because qat is the hip, and that's where you got qash too, inside the hip.
Interesting. When I learned body parts for the first time, it's using all the bones to talk about lots of body parts.
Yeah, because then you see like, and sometimes it gets named after one where you wouldn't, like, yeah, I would have thought that this would be hip inside bone, but then that would sound like a bone in your pocket. Qash is hip, and qash too is pocket, which means inside the hip. So this one right here, cooch,
Ooh,
cooch,
ooh,
cooch.
ooh.
That is the tailbone. There's a term, kuchtakuchen, which has returning or backwards. Da as a classifier, I would imagine. Kuch, which is a body part that's been turned into a verb root. And then in, which is technically decessive, means used to be. But kuchtakuchen means backwards. If you're walking backwards. So here's these ones. تخ 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 That's one that gets sore if you sit down for too long.
Is that took?
Yeah. Tuk is in there.
Like your cookies?
Yeah.
That's how you can remember it.
Yeah, right. Tuk. Where does that come from? Tukus. That's got to be another language, right?
Yiddish, maybe.
Maybe Yiddish. Oh, that would sound right.
When I hear tukas, like, hey, you tukas.
Yeah, right. Think of like the Jewish community kind of.
Yep, it's from Yiddish.
Is it?
Yeah.
Sheesh. But this one comes from tuk. What else? What's the next part?
Mouth.
Mouth or opening, because that's not a mouth. So tuk, or sometimes it's tuk, is butthole. This is called butthole bone. Even though it's off to the side. I don't know.
Wait, so how's that different than your tailbone? Where's that pointing?
It's right here. So this little set of bones right there. Okay, the femur. قد تتعاقي. قد تتعاقي. So there's tzaq and tu. What's this part? Yeah, it's the lap. So quts is a lap. It's also a thigh.
So you could say, like, ganu, guts, sit in my lap.
Yeah, you can say quts qat qanu. Sit on my lap. Kishakanuku. Kishakanuku. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 parts and a relational suffix. What are the 4 parts? Where we start? Want to start at the end? What's new?
Bone or skull?
Shell.
Shell.
Shakanuku is head on shell.
So, knee, skull.
Well, yeah. Well, I would say nuke is a shell. Like if you had a crab shell, an egg shell, those are all nuke. There's ka for on. There's sha for head. And then what's this last one? Ki. That's your knee. Knee, head, on, shell. That's how you do kneecap. This one, I'm not entirely sure. But looking through Jeff Lear's notes, I would guess that this one is called Tlein, and this one is ʼaan. And this word has to do with the calf, so the lower part of the leg. And it gets pretty wild because technically, I would say from the elbow down on the outside, that's all jin. Jin, jin, jin. If you say jin, people are going to think of hand, but you could also be talking about your lower arm. Khik is upper arm. Same with this, khus. If you say khus, people are going to think of a foot, but it could also be the lower part of the leg. This is how it works. And it could sometimes be the whole leg or the whole arm, jin. Okay. So now you're ready for all those skeleton parts. There's a whole bunch more than that. But these are just sort of like a friend of mine is teaching in Huna and was trying to say, like, do we have something like this? So I was like, I'll make something like that. That looks really fun.
And modify the head, shoulders, knees, and toes on.
Oh, there is one. Yeah, or how
Yeah.
they haven't said it in a while, but there is one.
They say, I think they go achwak, achguk,
Oh.
ache, achsha.
Uh,
I think that's the order they go.
mhm. My eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. Yeah.
Achsha, achik, achi, achusach, ki, achusach, ki, achusach, sha, achik, ki, achusach, wak, achguk, ache, achsha. Let me try to do it like really fast. Fun stuff, folks. Okay. Story time. Oh, wait, we had to do these ones first. This should be pretty fast. So these are it's the Halloween special brought to you by Gold Belt Heritage. So to say it is scary. Let me zoom in on this a little bit. Chat. Okay. Kushachetchen. 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 There are a few verbs that can get this shun or sometimes chun at the end, which turns the verb into, I guess, an adjective. I don't know if it's an adjective. It's like it easily causes the verb to happen. I'll get a list of them together at some point. But there is a verb which is usually something dach kaudlechet. So you could say kate dach kaudlechet. I'm scared of dogs. Or you could say I dach kaudlechet. I'm scared of you. So there's ways you can conjugate that one. But this one just means it is scary. And then this one is, it says I'm scared, but you could also translate this as, ah! It's like in the moment. So you wouldn't, this is not a verb. There's a lot of people who start to learn Tlingit and they'll try to say something like, it was atskani. You would say, it was kaudlechet. But this is what you say. This is the I am scared. I yell out this thing. See big spider? See the creepy thing coming to your door asking for candy? Whatever the thing is. Atskani. Atskani.
Atskani.
Atskani.
Atskani.
That means it's how you quickly say yikes. I guess yikes would be a pretty good equivalent for it. This is a ghost. I think it means a smoke person. So underline this G. Just pretend there's an underline there. Seqiqawu.
Yaqaikawu.
Seqiqawu.
Yaqaikawu.
Seqiqawu.
Kawu.
Anybody eat watermelon berries?
Uh,
Those are called seqiqawu tlequ. Do you think Tlingit people used to eat them a long time ago? No, because I don't know. It's just because somebody I never heard why, but they are and they're edible. They're totally edible. But I asked an elder, and she's like, "No, because they're scary." It's funny because in class last night, we're having this like talk about all these different ways to talk about peace, and we're sort of struggling because sometimes people, again, sometimes folks want to translate stuff from English to Tlingit, and that sometimes it's a bit of a rough journey. Because the phrase was like challenge for peace. I was like, what does that even mean? Because sometimes when you have to translate stuff, does that mean like I have peace and I'm challenging you to come get it from me? Or does that mean like we're committed to obtaining it? Like you got to sort of dig out the meaning sometimes. Because some stuff sounds really good in English. And people do this to me all the time. Like, could you translate this? I was like, what does that even mean? Like, I don't know. It's just this phrase. Okay.
So we should all stop eating watermelon berries.
Well, you can. But just there's quite a few things. Sikikawushechu is that puffball mushroom, and that's the face paint of the ghost. Again, I don't know why. Okay, orange. Sheikh Yachyati.
Yachti.
Sheikh Yachyati.
Yachti.
Black. Uch Yachyati.
Yachti.
Uch Yachyati.
Yachti.
Halloween mask. Yesha.
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 That could also pop up before a noun to mean counterfeit one of those. Like Yeshadana would be counterfeit money. It means the one that ravens. So raven is built in there. October. Tlein.
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 Blood. She. She. So here's a vampire. Whoops. Okay. We're gonna have to lose the translation. Here's a vampire. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. How do these all work? What's the ka part? People's. So the low tone version usually means a person's. What about she? Blood, right? So here's this high short vowel. When you put a possessive marker on it, pushes it long and low. Ha, same thing as this one. Tudach. From inside. Tunach would be through the inside. Tudach would be from the inside. And what about ashayich? It's not dancing. I'll tell you that.
Pronoun and suck.
Suck, right? I want to suck your blood, right? So it would be this one, right? And so this one is we talked about this, I think, a little bit. Some verbs that end with a double A, if you put some suffix on it, it'll switch it to an ʼai. So this in the perfective, so if you'd say, ach sheyi, ach tudach, the vampire, or well, I guess then you could name it. Ka sheyi qatudach achayach. Ach sheyi ach tudach It sucked my blood. The vampire sucks my blood. It's a useful phrase, perhaps over the weekend. I hope you don't have any vampire encounters, but if you do now, you'd be like, well, at least I could say it. Fun point, there's a body part in this verb, aushitsha. Anybody hear what it is?
Knack? Play? Is it knack? No.
Aushitsha. What's sha? Anybody know that one? What does a baby suck on? It's a breast. It's a breast. Okay, your time has come. It's your turn. Iit kuwaha.
Eat kuaha.
Iit kuwaha.
Eat kuaha.
Witchcraft. This is the bad magic. Hiu.
Ew.
Hiu.
Ew.
Hiu.
Ew.
You could make a verb out of that too. Chatu wa hiu. They put bad magic on me. Hechwa is the good magic. And as far as like magic, what does that mean? Oh, so one thing I was saying earlier, which is last night in Advanced Tlingit, we were talking about peace. And then at one point we were trying to figure out like all these peace phrases. I was like, well, there's all these terms for peace. Like kayej is peace. Kauduwayej is like it's peaceful water or something. Then there's all these metaphors about still waters, stillness, a whole bunch of things like that. And someone said, you know, we sure used to fight a lot of people. Why do we got so many words about peace? I said, well, that's true. But I was like, we were kind of ready to fight sometimes. But maybe we had all these words for peace so that we didn't wipe ourselves out by like killing each other off. And then a spider, kanasadi,
Kanasadi.
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 And a witch is nauktsati.
Now.
Not on the list. Nauktsati.
Now.
Okay. Okay. Any questions? I don't know pumpkin.
Oh, Lahash made one for last year when I was working with him at the school. It was like jack-o'-lantern head, but he used like the shell verb. I'll
Oh,
have to pull it out and then I can send it to everyone.
sheesh.
Oh.
Okay, let's start on our story. So here's the story. It's called Yéil, ʼaan. Yéil, ʼaan. Yéil, ʼaan. What do you all think it's about? Raven
Even end.
and
Fire.
fire. So we're going to take a slow crawl through this. It's 16 pages long. This is a condensed version of a story. It's a fairly short story to begin with. And this comes from 3 different storytellers. Shah Dog, Robert Zuboff, who's Kakwedi, Kaski. Follow page on this thing? Okay. Kaski, who is Chukin Shah. Her English name was Susie James. And Keet Yanai, who was Chukanadi, and his name was Willie Marks. Okay, let me move this couple things around so we're going to have a big screen. So the way I like to do this is we'll read a sentence, like a volunteer reader, and you'll read it, then I'll repeat it, and then we are going to translate this thing together. We might have to dig around for stuff. I can look, you can look. Show you how to sort of start breaking this stuff down. And when we do this type of stuff, the whole idea is so that we can put it together ourselves. Anybody want to read this first one?
ʼaan gosh aku bedah awe
Sheesh. ʼaan qashaqu iddakh awah. Let's just start. What do you see? And then we'll narrow it down to what we gotta go find. On.
This land.
Yeah, land or village.
I remember it's come up a couple times. Can't remember though.
It's like after or something.
Yeah, so it is to follow something, and then dach is from. So you could say after it, following that, from it. And the from it, it's usually used, it's often used as a time marker. So you say, yak ei sitkam san it dach. Good afternoon. Right? So it usually just means after. But sometimes if it's being used in a story, it means like there's a little bit of a cause and effect thing in addition to sort of a time thing. So what's that leave us with? Qashaku?
Is the ku a postposition?
No, it's a verb. This comes from a verb. But what we're going to do, so we're going to take this qashaku, and the first place we're going to go is the Lingít dictionary. Someday I'll learn to close a document or two before I start class. That's not today. Okay.
Are we allowed to look simultaneously?
What's that?
Are we allowed to look like simultaneously?
Yeah, dig around.
Okay.
Dig around. Huh?
No. Look it up long and loud.
Oh, yeah.
Co-
Yeah, look up ku. If you want to look up ku. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the dictionary and I'm going to just copy and paste it and see if anything comes up.
Flood.
And something does. So this is from a verb. So wudliku can mean one of two things. Anybody know what those two things are? Wudliku. So we'll go look up ku. So we did the short version, but then we're going to sort of do a deeper dive. And that means going into the verb dictionary. So we'll go down, we'll look up ku. P, ku. So ku is flooded. Ku is vomit. Because it kind of floods. It's a flood.
Floods from the inside.
Right. Flooding,
So that would be
flooding something.
to drop from the inside.
But on this term qashaku is important. On qashaku. Or sometimes they'll just say qashaku. But usually when they're talking about on qashaku, they're referring to something that flooded the whole world. Okay. So now we got an qashaku iddakh away. How are we going to translate that? You guys get a pick.
This land after it flooded.
Yeah. I would probably say an qashaku would be one concept. And I would probably say, just sort of doing work in these stories, when I see these, I would say, the flood.
After this flood.
Okay. Okay, so this is both of these lines. Who would like to read them?
Klesaya dosa iti ye wuti ya Linkitani kach.
Sheesh. Okay, let's do this in chunks, I think. Keshaya dasa
Ayadasa.
itiyewuti
Itiyuti.
yashingitani koch.
Yashlingatani kach.
What do we recognize?
Ani when it's together means the whole world, right?
Yep. And so, whenever we deal with the world, hold on, let me check something out. I had the wrong apostrophes in here. So, when we have the world, it's really interesting because Lingít ani koch means on the world. There's the on, and here's the world. Is to reside or rest. You could also say Lingít ani qeich, which is also on the world, but it technically means between the folds of the world. There's also a term Lingít ani tuqwani, the people inside of the world. So, okay, so we'll just say on the world. What about that?
There was nothing left.
Yeah, there was nothing there. So we got the ayah. We can kind of not think about that. Klesh da sa, nothing. Klesh da sa is nothing. I should probably shorten that. No, I don't think I'll just okay. Klesh ayah da sa a ite Yewuti. So that leaves us with two. So Tleshtasa is nothing. Then we have a'iti and Yewuti. What are those two things?
The Yewuti is she, he, it became that way. Became that way?
Yeah, so this was, it was being that way, or we're going to look at these yati verbs, because this one yati verb, if you can use this, wuti, yati, gukwati, nakati, then there's about 10 different things you could put in front of it. Yachyati, to be like something. Yeyati, to be a certain way. Yeyati, to be at a place. Itinachyati, to need something. Tunyati, to be concerned about something. We'll see a whole bunch of them. But this one is going to be the one to be located somewhere. So nothing there, and then it leaves us with a'iti.
Next.
What's that?
Next.
Next, yeah, so this ite on its own is sort of like the remains of something. But it's a complicated concept, right? So we're gonna, like when you say itinach, you're using this word. You say chus ite, footprints, you're using this word. So the remains of a foot, chus ite, are footprints. The remains of a fire, gun ite, is the charred earth where the fire was. If you ate a bunch of food and you had some crumbs left over, atcha ite. You can also say ha ite, haku, our descendants, the ones who will be in the place where we were. Sometimes it works like this too. Like if I had to stay home or I had something come up and I had to get someone to come teach the class for me, they might say, "Chonei itichahan." I'm standing in the place of chonei, which just means I'm standing where they were. You could use that phrase, like let's say your relative, your older relative was a spokesperson for your clan. And they said, you got to go talk in my place. I can't make it. So then you could say their name, itichahan. Doesn't mean they're gone. It just means you're standing in the place where they were. It could also be a time marker for after that thing. That's what it's doing here. So what is the thing then? The It's the only thing we've talked about so far in this story.
A what?
Huh?
A what?
Yeah. The flood. So this is what Lingít loves to do. It names something and then it switches to this it's. So how are we going to put all this together?
There was nothing remaining.
Yeah, you can say remaining, in its remains. And so like this is interpretation, right? So we're going to kind of come to consensus, move along to the next thing. At some point, I think those who become pretty good speakers of Tlingit usually do some translation work. We've got probably 600 hours of recorded Tlingit out there, and maybe 1% of it has been translated. So translation work is in your future. It just is. But as you do it, you're going to have decisions to make. You're going to interpret it into English because the languages work differently.
What work is the ayah doing? Like, why is it there?
it's there to just sort of, it doesn't need, you could say Tlein sa a iti Yéil. What it probably does is it gives a little bit of extra attention to this. So sometimes aya and awe get the listener to think about the word they just heard, or provides almost like a comma between a couple of concepts. For here, I would say, so you can almost say there really was nothing in its remains on the word. And so, but when you do this interpretation work, there's questions. Who are you interpreting for? Do you want someone who doesn't know anything about Lingít to be able to read this story and understand it? Are you translating for other learners so they could see these different pieces that are in there? I tend to do for the learners. But there's word order stuff too, because you could also say, not it is what its remains was there or was being this world on residing, right? So, but I think there's a benefit to looking at it like that too, because as you move from English to Lingít, you're going to have to do some word rearranging. In English, the words would come out in a certain order, and that order will be different in Lingít. One more, and we'll go home. Who wants to read?
Yeah.
Oh,
Shakat at Kwa Ka Yewuti.
sheesh. Ashtakat at Kwa Akaye Wuti. That shtakat, you're going to have to use that word too. The L to the D. Shta, shta. Getting that is sometimes tricky. A lot of people, they just want it to be that so bad. Shtakat, right? The cha sometimes help because that becomes one word. Ashtakat. What are the parts that we recognize here? We might be able to get all of these. Might not even have to look up anything.
So that's just. I actually don't realize I don't know what shortcut means. I just know its context.
Everything?
Yeah, so shtakat on its own is all or every. So shtakat at, everything. Shtakat ka, everyone. Shtakat yuhan, all of y'all. Shtakat uhan, all of us all. When you put cha in front of it, it's almost like every single thing. Shtakat ka, every single person. Shtakat at, everything. Ka, akaye wuti.
Is Kwa like the although?
Yes. Yeah. So this is, the long form of this is ku'a. It comes out as kwa. It's not, it's ties to the thing right before it though. It doesn't work like the word although, however, or but. It doesn't work like those are conjunctions in English, right? So you're like, this, but this other thing. It kind of does that logically, but it usually like says, this, however, and there should be something right before it. Khatqa'a, wa'aqa'a, hasqa'a. Everything, though, akaye wuti.
Ka on it.
On it, right? But everything, bit of a mysterious start. There's the start to our story. After the flood, there was nothing in its remains on the world, but every single thing was on. There you go. One last thing before we go. I'll put a link to this up. So this is called the Clankit Reference Guide. I didn't know what else to call it. But what it mostly is what I think are the most common and necessary verbs. So I don't know how many there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16. Maybe 32, 33. The goal of this book is to list these verbs in a command or hortative. So command form is you do it, y'all do it. A hortative is let us do it, let it happen, let them do it, let people do it. Then a prohibitive, so the do, the don't, well, the do, the let's, the don't. The imperfective, positive and negative, is, isn't, or does, doesn't, doing, doesn't, or not doing, sorry. Perfective, positive and negative, did or became or was, didn't or wasn't. Future, will or will be, and the future negative, won't or won't be. Those are the main modes that you need to communicate. There's a whole bunch of fancy stuff too. Can't, would have, every single time, those types of things. Don't worry about that stuff now. Look it up if you want to. But as far as what you should be committing to memory is these verbs in these forms. So here's something to be, that same verb that we just looked at, to be somewhere. So you got naqati or inati. So these are commands, prohibitives. Don't be that way. Don't you all be that way. It is that way, not that way. Was that way, wasn't that way. Will be that way, won't be that way. So these are sort of in these chart forms so that you can quickly look them up. Like for example, you might say, I need to say we are tired. How to quit, it's right there. What it needs is some markers to show you where the M would be for the inland. It would be right there, and there, and there. But then you could say, we won't be tired. So this doesn't give you the translation for all of these. But if you look up here, then you understand what the perfective and the futures, you could say, let me be tired. I don't know why you would say that, but you can also command someone to be tired, but I don't know why you'd say that either.
I think both for children, like let me be tired, don't jump on me, or like go to sleep, be tired.
Right?
That's okay.
Careful what you wish for with some of these.
I
But
don't have this problem.
so they are listed here. Check it out. Take a look at it. We'll start going through some of these just to see them. And so the purpose of this text is so you can look them up quickly. It's like a speed guide for using some of these verbs. But as you're using them, start looking for patterns and things that you think you're seeing. Okay. Go to Chish. See what happens after this flood next week. Great work, everybody. And Chish.
goodness, geez.
Next time you offer me coffee.
Cheers.
Cheese.
Sleep, Jeff.
Finish cheese. Finish cheese.
Ah,
Get to Dogden.
Oketon.